If you've seen my other videos, you know that I'm part of an international community that seeks to do goodness and beauty in the world. Not only do we seek to do good and beautiful things in the world, we seek to mutually support one another and help one another become better at doing those good and beautiful things. 2 years ago, I was asked what our community's value statement is, and it really wasn't hard to figure out. We are a formative community. This is not a service that we provide. This is something that we are. Recently, a friend asked, what does that mean? And that's what we're going to talk about today. There's kind of two ways people enter our community. One is in a kind of non-profit sort of work, and another is as people who start businesses or take jobs in other countries, but they want the skills and mutuality and competencies that come with being one of us. So when we were discussing this, it became clear quickly that those competencies and skills and attitudes and abilities and that mutuality of support are not services that we provide. Those things happen in the warp and woof of being part of this community. It is in the being in the community that you are formed. It's like being in a river means that you're going to go downstream. It's not that the river is providing a service to you. It's that you're in the water and the water's going downstream. And if you are in this community, we are going toward greater vibrancy, greater resiliency, greater health, greater competency, deeper development, and a much deeper and broader awareness of what God is up to on the planet. We are getting better at being as people all over the world. So when we talk about that, we use the term formative community. Defining what that means is tricky. It's much easier to describe it, and I think it might be better to describe it. If we were to define formative community, it would crystallize, it would harden, it would calcify. And this is a little bit more of a living thing. Let me try, though, to describe it to you. Let's start with bringing greater vividness to the notion of formative. What does that word mean? All right, so 5 guys sitting around in a pot circle in their mom's basement, not getting jobs, not getting better at anything, not pursuing education, not being grown-ups, not being men. This is a disabling community. They are together, they would call each other friends, but the ways that they go about being together are making less of them. That's a disabling community. Bunch of people after work showing up at a bar. Not that showing up at a bar is a bad idea, but they show up at a bar because they don't want to go home. And they drink because they don't want to face their problems. When that's the dynamic, when that's the chemistry in the community, that's an enabling community. Not in the sense that it's the opposite of disabling, but in the sense that everyone is sort of helping one another not face transformation. Now, a distorting community is another option, or a malformative community is another option. Cults of personality, or even like mob think. I think we've noticed in 2020 what happens when Twitter and Facebook and social media tell us how to think, or we tell one another what we haven't thought about, but we say it very passionately. So like as a group, we all get less educated, less informed, and more feverishly passionate about what we don't know. Right? That's a malformative community. Perhaps the most dangerous of all, and I think the one that I see the most in our line of work, is complicit community. That's where we all together agree not to get in each other's business. We might not do it out loud, but we simply don't inform or disrupt one another's rhythms or habits. And habits are really important. Behaviors are the whole foods of cultures. Culture is the water that we move in and the water that moves us. We as a formative community are formative if our culture is formative, if our culture is developmentally biased. The way that we shape a culture is by identifying key behaviors that will actually help the water get started moving in that direction. A complicit community is comprised of people who all agree to the same ideas but refuse to inform or interrupt one another's rhythms, practices, or patterns. Now, each of those communities was formative in one way or another, but what makes formative communities stand apart is that they're intentionally so. A formative community is intentionally formative. Perhaps another way to say it is, we come together because we intend to form and be formed by one another. It is why we are identifying ourselves with each other. Everyone on the planet is part of 10, 20, 100 different communities. But a formative community is a community that we intentionally join because we want to be formed in the ways that it is being formed. That might be the closest thing to a definition I have ever said about this. To give you some more metaphors to work with, I'm going to tap into my own childhood. So I grew up in the traditional martial arts. There are lots of kinds of dojos out there. Let's see, there is the Bad Intentions Dojo. That dojo is usually a bunch of guys who have problems with their dads. It's usually in a basement. The door is almost always metal. It smells bad. All the walls are covered in like pads or like mattresses that are bungee corded to posts. The mats on the floor stink and the heavy bags have seen better days, and everybody in that gym would really like to spar with you. And when they say spar with you, they don't mean get better together, they mean beat you up. Typically on the opposite side of town from that dojo is the Kung Fu daycare, the McDojo, right? It's the one where people drop their kids off every day at 4:30 after school to kick and scream an hour away. Everybody's doing katas and patterns, fighting invisible people who are not there, actually not getting better. So at the dark, dank, Bad Intentions Dojo, people are becoming worse people while they're getting better at a particular skill. Kind of like the way you can go to school and get more informed but less wise. At the McDojo, no one's getting more competent, and everyone's sort of being tricked into believing that they are. Everyone's complicit in the lie that what they're doing is actually making them fighters, when really it's a hobby. And it's not bad, it just isn't getting the job done. Somewhere between those two, you'll find two kinds of traditional dojos. In one traditional dojo, there's going to be some esoteric claims to secret techniques and strange powers, and I've been part of one of those dojos, and it's really like a tiny kingdom so that the sensei can feel strong, right? It's a waste of time, but it results in the diminishment of the individuals. But somewhere in town, there's usually a dojo that has a teacher who really loves what he's teaching or what she's teaching. And the people there are not just learning to fight, they are practicing a way together. Dojo means house of the way. It's a space in which a way is practiced. And not only is it the physical space, but it is the community that contains and is contained by that way. This metaphor might mean very little to you, and it might mean tons. But this metaphor means the most to me because a formative community practices a way together. Not because they believe it is the only way, just like any dojo worth its salt knows that they're not the only people who know how to fight. But because they know that by practicing this way, they are becoming better and stronger and more. They're submitting to the water as the water moves them toward deeper, better, more beautiful competence. All right, having muddied the water on what formative means, let's get blurry on community. Actually, I don't think I can blurry the word community up any more than it has been blurried in the last 30 years in our kind of literature. The word community means whatever whoever is talking wants it to mean. That's pretty frustrating because what happens is you read 20 books or get a million emails that say community, and every one of them, it means something a little bit different. When I say formative community, when I use the word community, I'm referring at least in part to the fact that these people have committed to be in this way, to practice this way together with one another. There is a clear line between those who have not committed and those who have committed. And it's not just committed to doing the things, but it's committed to taking this journey together. If I have committed to be part of this community, and you have committed to be part of this community, then I take it as part of my work, not ancillary to, not a distraction from, but I take it as part of my work to contribute to or support or scaffold or resource your ongoing formation. And I assume and invite that you will do the same for me. If we're part of a staffing agency, we just all go to work that might be similar. But if we are part of a community, then we are in this together, and we're in this together in identifiable ways. This is how we draft off one another's momentum. This is how my development is not always only contingent upon my action on that target. This is how being together means that we all keep going even when some of us are tired. It's not that someone's cracking a whip, but it's that the herd the pack has momentum. And by just staying with the pack, and by the pack keeping us with the pack, we can all keep going, even when sometimes we don't want to. And it also makes our strength good news, because instead of having to drag others when we are strong, by simply continuing to go, we pull along with us those who've lost their wind. It's by our mutual commitment to one another that we can have a shared momentum. So a formative community is intentionally formative. There is a shared intent to be formed in certain ways. There is a shared commitment to be formed in certain ways. And there are therefore necessarily shared means. That dojo I described to you, that dojo I love, not the wacky one or the dark scary one or the karate daycare, but like the dojo, the good dojo, that where people become warriors, right? They become strong and dangerous in the best senses, dangerous to evil. Everyone doesn't show up and just work out however they want. And people don't show up for like one-on-one coaching with a personal kung fu trainer. There are things that they do together, and they all do those things. And there are other things that they do individually that others don't do. There are drills that I'll work that you won't work, and there will be skills that I need to develop that you already have. Because I'm short, I'll work grappling more than you because you're tall, and you'll work kicking more than I will. But there'll be some things that we all do because we're practicing away together. In the West, this is a really uncomfortable idea. It's like we're terrified of the possibility of uniformity. And that's not what we're after. We're not after uniformity when we talk about formative community. But as a martial arts instructor, I know that if you want to learn how to punch, you have to learn how I punch. And then you got to learn how we punch. We in this dojo punch. And then once you've punched that punch 10,000 times, you're ready to learn how you punch. That's just the way things are learned in human communities. I don't want to bog down here too much. This is the one that always makes people terrified. But I'll just say here that formative communities that work tend to have a few practices that hold them together, because practices are the whole foods of a community's culture. Now, my friend who asked me to clarify what formative community is also asked me to kind of hold it in contrast to local fellowships or other kinds of formative communities, or why should someone join a formative community like the one that I'm in? Does it replace or displace other communities like a local fellowship? And to all of that, I would say no. A guy named Ralph Winters wrote to this. He talked about modality and sodality in the New Testament. There's two different kinds of communities described in the New Testament. The local fellowship, and then kind of the wandering band of workers. But as he also unpacked the history of the Master's people across time after that, especially in the first maybe 5 or 6 centuries, he noticed the development of orders that would, in addition to the commitments that are just part and parcel of being the Master's people, they would feel or sense an invitation from the Master to execute with vigor on some particular part of his heart, whether it be hospitality or justice or the kinds of things I'm involved in. These communities would make commitments to one another that would allow them to become very good at stewarding that part of the Master's heart and executing on the Master's dreams that come from that part of his heart. And they got very good at helping one another grow in those competencies. This did not in any way displace their commitment to the Master's people on the earth, right? But this idea of being a community that has a shared commitment and a shared intent, even apart from the history of the Master's people, just in the New Testament itself. You can see in Philippians 3, Paul uses this interesting phrase. He talks about his own intense pursuit of the Master, and he says that those who are spiritually mature will think this way. He says, mark those people as examples and practice life the way that they do. If you don't think this way yet, the Master will show you. Don't worry about it, the Master will show you. And Paul goes on to say, but just let's all keep what we've got together. He says, I think the language is mind what we have attained, keep the same rule. And the rule there isn't like law. It's more like the notion of regula, like a rule of life or a plan for action together. Away. Let us all practice away together. Because we are formed. by being in community. For the past 25 years, both in my education, in my professional development, and in my work, I have given myself to the question of how people change. And while this is a radical oversimplification, I will say that people do not change by wanting to change or by trying to change. And they don't normally change just by being magically changed. We change primarily by identifying ourselves with communities that are changing in the ways that we want to change. This is why Weight Watchers works. This is why CrossFit works. Weight Watchers is a community that's trying to lose weight together, and CrossFit is a community that's trying to become the fittest people on earth together. This stuff works because people change by being part of communities of change. That's what formative community is about. When we agree together that we have sensed an invitation from the Master to share with one another in the journey of being formed in certain ways, and in particular the community that I'm part of seeks to carry the good news of the Master across cultural barriers. We seek to become unmade in the process of living in a foreign culture and be remade in His image in a new place, and along the way learn how to be His hands and feet and voice in a completely foreign environment. So our community is trying to follow the Master cross-culturally, but also help other people from those cultures follow the Master as well. This is both our work and the laboratory or the dojo in which we are formed. This is our invitation and our vocation. This is our inner journey and our outer journey. If you were to ask me why I am part of my community, I would say it is because we are a formative community. We are helping one another become the kind of people who can be shaped and who can shape the world in the image of our Master. All right, it's getting cold and dark out here. I may have muddied that up for my friend. Maybe I clarified it for you. I would love it if you would drop a comment in the comment section or a question in the comment section, or maybe some other analogies that I could maybe bring to bear on this question, because not everybody grew up in the dojo like I did. What other ways could be used to describe how formative community is formative and is community?